Today I thought I would stop by one of the most famous boxing gyms in the world, Kronk Boxing Gym in Detroit, Michigan. My first visit to Kronk was 1987, November. It was a little chilly. I went down to see what it was like. I was invited in by Tommy Hearns and Emanuel Steward. The temperature was over 100 degrees. It was very warm, especially with a winter coat on. What I saw at that time of day were some of the amateurs, little kids, boys, 5, 6 years old, in groups working with an amateur coach. Mr. Logan took the boys into the gym. Before they were even allowed to box, they had to show that they had the work ethic, and they had to jog. They had to spar outside the gym. They had to hit the heavy bag, speed bag, do sit-ups, do their running. And if after 2 weeks they'd been able to do that, he might let them put on some gloves. And he might teach them how to fight. He worked alongside Bill Miller and Sammy Poe, and they took great pride in teaching those boys how to fight. It was exciting to watch. It was interesting. Some boys came in and were brought by principals, uncles, brothers, cousins. They were kids that maybe were having trouble in school, needed to have something to do afterwards to stay out of trouble. And this is the gym that they came to. Tommy Hearns actually started at another gym, but this is where he spent his time with Emanuel Steward training. As you see, spray painted on the side of Kronk Gym, says True Kings Only. What a lot of people don't know is that Hilmer Kenty was the first world champion out of Kronk Gym, followed by Tommy Hearns. Other fighters included Milt McCrory, Steve McCrory, Jamal Hinton, Rebekah, Tarek Salmasi, Gerald McClellan, Michael Moore, Leon Zerbarber. Then the heavyweights started coming in. And even, let's not forget, Dennis Andres, great champion. Lennox Lewis trained here. Klitschko trained here. Now, no one trains here. I've been given a lot of theories by boxing trainers, promoters, and managers as to why boxing is not as popular among young people today as it used to be. Why do you think there's not as many fighters going into boxing? If you had to...
I think that football, basketball, other sports take away the bigger guys. The smaller guys don't have an opportunity in those sports, so they gravitate towards boxing or some other sport. But the bigger guys have better opportunities in those type of sports here in America.
Right. What about some of the amateurs that you've seen? Do you like anybody out there?
What, heavyweights? Not really, no.
So how would you explain that? They're
because
just not out
they're going into football and basketball.
Yeah.
The foreigners, the ones particularly from Eastern Europe or from even regular Europe, are too big to be soccer players. So they go into boxing.
The reason is gyms have closed. States have lost the ability to pay for recreational programs. Kronk was a great gym and should have been retained and maintained. Hi, my name's Rebekah Brown, and I'm a journalist who covered Kronk Gym and other Detroit gyms from 1987 through 2004.
The footage that you just watched was something that I shot in September 2017. Less than 2 weeks later, the great Kronk Gym burned to the ground. The gym may be gone, but it's not forgotten. Its history remains. I'm a native Detroiter, and I'm glad to see that the city of Detroit rebounded, but angered to see that so many Detroit recreation centers have closed, because through the red and gold doors of Kronk Gym and others like it, many great fighters were made. Detroit gyms are a part of Detroit history. Here's a list of some of the fighters that I interviewed during that time frame. They shared their stories, I watched them train like warriors, and they all fought like champions. So here's a thank you from me to you, letting you know that those great boxing memories will be preserved and you will never be forgotten.